welcome to our distinguished guests. Welcome to everybody. Of course, every year the team of the 5G Techritory organizes very fascinating discussions and panels, and that's why this event has become so popular all over the world. However, I think this one is a little special because it's, of course, the opening panel discussion, and we have here with us officers in the right positions in some of the most influential organizations in the world that can really make a difference. So we will make this simple. I will go 3 times around. Hopefully we can explore the current situation, what's coming in the near future, and then what's the vision. So if we can begin just with, my first question to you is essentially, if you can just give a little bit more about yourself, your organization, and what are you currently doing with respect to the digitalization and connectivity in Europe. Let's start with you, Audrey.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Audrey Plonk. I'm the head of digital economy policy at the OECD. That includes our work on broadband and connectivity that dates back to more than 40 years at the OECD. You're probably aware that we're an intergovernmental organization of 38 member countries, but we work globally across a variety of technology areas, and connectivity being the basis of all digital transformation is core to our work. So what do? Well, we develop methodologies for measuring broadband in a cross-country comparable way, and we provide that evidence publicly as well as use it as a basis for doing policy analysis to help countries advance their competitive ecosystem in the connectivity space. So rather than giving you a long laundry list of what we do, I thought I'd give you an example of what we've done to illustrate the kind of work that we do at the OECD. So in 2012, we undertook, and I'm going to leave Europe for a minute. I know we're focused on Europe, but I'm going to leave Europe for a moment because the OECD is a global organization with representation from Asia as well as North and South America. But in 2012, we undertook a review of the Mexican telecommunications market, which at the time was dominated by a single company with 80% market share in the fixed market and 70% in the market share in the mobile market. This insufficient competition had obviously led to poor market penetration across Mexico, which had put the country in the lowest of the OECD broadband rankings. And I know 2012 seems like a long time ago, but it was only 10 years ago, so just keep that in mind. The welfare loss as a result of this dysfunctional market in the Mexican telecommunication space was estimated at US dollars 129 billion in lost welfare because of this dysfunctional market. So in the review that we did in 2012, we made a series of recommendations, 31 to be exact. And over the course of many years after 2012, Mexico implemented the vast majority of those recommendations. They were things like a reorganization of the regulator. They were things like competition in the marketplace. And in the almost 10 years since then, between 2012 and 2022, Mexico added 85.9 million additional mobile broadband subscriptions. That's the equivalent of the entire populations of Peru and Colombia together in less than 10 years. So policy has a huge impact on access, on deployment, and on use of technologies, particularly in the connectivity space, which is fundamental to the digital transformation. And then obviously we'll talk, I'm sure, in this panel about digital divides, but that experience in Mexico obviously gave a huge part of the population, low and middle income, access to mobile broadband that they had never had before, which is key to advancing our society. So that's an illustration of the kind of work that we do at the OECD and who we are. I'll just say on the topic of kind of what's happening today, in terms of gigabit fixed broadband in the OECD area, we've seen a 166% increase in subscriptions just in the last 2 years since the end of COVID. And I have a lot more interesting data to throw at you in the next 45 minutes, but I'll stop there for now.
Thanks a lot, thanks a lot. Of course, the ITU is our overarching organization globally that is, driving our world of telecommunications. So Jaroslaw, what's going on with the ITU?
Yes, I'm coming from the ITU, which is the most senior international organization. I refrain from using the word the oldest, because some of you could think, well, we have the problem. But we don't have the problem, because the ITU is accompanying the ICT sector since its, in fact, creation, starting from the telegraphy, going through the television, through the internet, and now going into the directions where the new emerging technologies, in fact, are driving and changing the facet, how we are approaching the telecommunication, traditionally understood, and how we are migrating towards the communication universe, and migrating also towards the other meaning of the communication, which is not only the cable, satellite, and making sure that you are connected, but more importantly, how this communication is used. And there is a lot of efforts done in this direction. It, of course, has disruptive effect because at the table, we are not any longer having only the ministers of the telecommunications who, in the previous life, were also the CEOs of the state-owned telecom companies, but also we are speaking to the automotive, to the health, education, banking, and many, many others. It, of course, introduces a very big complexity. In particular, once you want to develop the international standard, once you want to develop the regulatory framework or the policy recommendation, which requires, in fact, the several views and making sure that at the country level also these dialogues are happening and effectively views are brought to the international or regional level. It's not easy. Not all countries are still already there. It requires a lot of capacity building, where we are doing a lot of efforts as the ITU to make sure that this comes across and this natural behavior at the government level and also at the regulators level. So recently we have launched also the framework for measuring the regulatory effectiveness with the framework of the 5th generation of regulation. Please don't mix this with the 5G. 5G is the technology. 5th generation of the regulation is the concept where we are taking a look how regulators are working with other sectors. And as of today, if we are taking a look at the 143 regulators existing in the world, only 60% of them are consulting and working with the other sectors. And this is the problem. This is a problem which we have to address jointly to make sure that enabling environment, which should inspire and should adopt disruptive technologies, can be built upon the consultative processes and inclusive processes, taking into account the views of different sectors, but more importantly, and this is something what I wanted to also to mention, also takes a little bit human-centric approach. The regulations policies are done by humans, but they should be done also for humans. That always the human-centric approach is in the middle of our considerations, and these technologies are beautiful. Exploring of their effectiveness and the impact, it's something amazing. But if we will forget to be in control, I think we'll be in the problem. Of course, it's very difficult, because at the policy level, we are always driven by different types of the drivers. When you're taking a look at the different measurements, it's clear. Broadband impacts economic growth. Yes, at the global level, 0.8% of the impact is generated by 10% of the growth of the broadband connectivity. Fixed one, the mobile connectivity has even bigger impact, so everybody is driving the connectivity to be the main objective. But of course, objective with the understanding that is meaningful one. And this is the reason why also the ITU recently has developed also the concept of the universal and meaningful connectivity, which not only puts the countries into some sort of the measurement table, but draws attention of the policymakers, decision makers to the two important aspects of the universality and meaningfulness. So how to make sure that all parts of the society, including the business, universities, educational institutions, are connected. This is one component. But then how to make sure that it's used properly, that the digital skills are there, that it's also resilient infrastructure, and also there is confidence in use of the ICTs, which is not always well understood and is not connected into the one framework at the country level. So this is the reason why, from our side, we are doing a lot of measurement also as our colleagues here from the OECD, but also we are doing a lot of assistance, direct assistance responding to the concrete challenges of the countries coming and saying we would like to catch up with the international standards. Please tell us what are the best practices, how to incorporate them into our workflows. Of course, I'm heading the Europe office, so a lot of operations in 46 countries are challenging because we are dealing with the big diversity, with those countries which are really leading the top innovation contests in the field of the ICTs. We are very proud of this, but we have also the countries which are in the process of accession to the EU, also the countries which are still preparing for the accession process, countries which have a lot of to catch up. I was recently, last week, in Montenegro, where 80% of citizens are in reach of the 5G. It's exemplary in the region, but the following day, moving to Bosnia-Herzegovina, we're discussing how to accelerate the rollout of 4G, which was just launched. Mm-hmm. And this is Europe. And so this shows only the two examples what we are dealing with, and this should be also the call to the all countries which are doing great progress to make the bridges, to transfer the know-how from those who already were there some years back, and then to help the others to leapfrog a little bit these old challenges which maybe for the others looks like very easy to be solved. That's why we're very happy also with today's Memorandum of Understanding signed between the Latvia and Ukraine. This is the really exemplary demonstration of the solidarity with the Ukraine, where a lot of work has to be done. 5G is also the technology for such a digitized country, and a great opportunity which can bring the nation to the next level of the meaningful connectivity. But I will come back still on a few items.
No, wonderful. I mean, thanks for this point. In the next round, I was very, very interested about this regulator discussion that you mentioned and how you are measuring or facilitating how they're working with other sectors. I think that's very key. I work often with regulators, and I agree that it might be a little bit of an issue, but maybe in the next round you can tell us a little bit more on how that's done. Let's move to our beloved European Union and European Commission. I'm personally think that I work daily and weekly with people from all over Europe, and I think this is being driven by the innovation programs that are facilitated from the European Commission, the integration that is happening. So Zaneta, please tell us, what are the main highlights that you would like to underline today?
Yes, so in my current position, I work for Executive Vice President Valdis Dombrovskis, okay, who is also EU Trade Commissioner. So my own expertise currently is more on the nexus between trade and technologies, okay, and security. I'm also working on the development of EU's economic security agenda, so far for myself. But of course, as you mentioned, the European Commission is first and foremost a policy maker for the whole European Union region. And as you know, we have defined the digital transition as one of the key priorities for the European Union in the years to come. And of course, in the light of that, we are both regulator, enforcer, meaning enforcer of rules, and also budget administrator. So we kind of run budgets and programs to support these political priorities. And one last point, very importantly, internationally, the European Commission is leading global conversations on tech issues. And I think the one current example, very obvious one, is a conversation in G7 on the artificial intelligence. And then we are also negotiating on behalf of EU member states. So just to give one example, we are currently negotiating digital trade agreements with Korea and Singapore, basically to facilitate business, doing business in tech and trade services, in these services. What I wanted to underline why this work is very important, because the single market has appeal for one very important reason, is that we provide legal certainty. And this is actually very important for any investor to have this legal certainty. And so during this mandate, we have tabled many proposals to provide legal certainty in this changing tech landscape. I can name Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act. Now we are about to finalize negotiations on I Act, also cybersecurity proposals. But the point here is that sometimes even by simply tabling a proposal, you are already sending strong signals to the market. And I can name here European Chips Act as a good example, because since it was tabled in February 2022, it has already mobilized 1 billion euros in private and public financing. So sometimes when you provide this like legal and policymakers input, actually it serves to mobilize both private and public financing. Okay, I could go in details, of course, but I think...
Just one question on this AI, because I think everybody's talking about it and a little bit worried about it. And, you know, what's your sense? How is that, first of all, do we as Europe have, you know, a common underlying understanding, and then let alone the bigger picture around the world? Do we in Europe have a consensus on what we would like with respect to, you know, how to contain or accelerate, but at the same time, you know, reduce the risks?
Yes, so first of all, I would go back to what Jaroslaw said. I think that there is a consensus, very large consensus in Europe, that technologies should be human-centric, and that they should actually reflect our values, principles of human rights, data protection, etc., etc. And on AI, I would separate two separate conversations that are currently ongoing. One is work of EU co-legislators, so member states and European Parliament, on final stretch on negotiating the Artificial Intelligence Act. So that's a piece of legislation. And here I think we will get it done by the end of the year, latest. Although it's extremely complicated, and you have indeed, as you said, various interests shooting from all sides. So this is one. So we are the first jurisdiction to have such a piece of legislation, of course. Second conversation that is moving extremely fast and extremely well, it is between so-called G7 countries. And again, this is about principle and one could say ethical principles that should underlie the development of AI. And this work is actually advancing very fast, so that all these countries that include European Union, but also US and UK, would come to an understanding of a set of principles upon which the AI technology should be developed.
Okay, so we're at principle setting stage. right now, yeah?
Yeah, but I think it's going to be a commitment that these countries will take, but it will be also open to other countries later on to join.
Well, thanks for doing all this. It's very important, and we're all looking at it. Let's move to the immediate next future.
Could
Please,
I only just follow up on this? Thank you very much for raising this. Because I think that this is very important to momentum, in fact, at the global level, but also at the regional level. Of course, Europe has quite a lot from our perspective of the ITU office for Europe. We're observing very passionately what is happening at the EU level and what type of the discussions with the different continents are happening, because AI has definitely a lot of potential, which is getting understanding of the community. I'm not 100% sure that the whole community understands the full potential of the AI, including all risks related to that. This is the reason why we are doing a lot of work around the capacity building in the ITU. We started the work already several years back with the AI for Good Summit, which in fact provided the concept at the UN level to bring the all UN agencies, which will bring the challenges of the world to the table. And then to bring also the tech companies, those who are working around the AI, and already the spot how the AI might solve the challenges of global challenges of the world. It's escalated and developed exponentially.
Wow.
We are very much pleased to have even over 100 robots last March under the leadership of our director of the standardization sector. We are able to speak to the robots, asking the questions, asking what they think. And one answer I got from one robot, I don't know if this was robot she or he, but it was it.
Okay.
And which told me it's important for us that the international standards are developed to allow us to communicate between us. And I was shocked hearing this.
Who is the us? The
Us,
robots?
robots.
AI.
Okay.
So robot already told me that he would like, it would like to interact with the others, and definitely ITU has a big role to play in order to ensure interoperability. Of course, well, the robot is only the mechanic display of this, what is happening at the intelligence level, but this shows the dynamics of the potential which can be brought to the table by AI. And of course, this evolves. This requires the global discussion, but this requires also immense work with all countries on the capacity building. And it doesn't matter if this is country of the tech advanced ecosystem in place, or the others who basically are confronted with the technology, and they need to become prepared for this. How to consume, how to protect the citizens, how to also engage the certain AI solutions into the, for example, public service digital solutions, which more and more are entered into the place with our knowledge, without our knowledge. So it requires the good preparations, preparedness of the public sector, but also, on the other hand, preparedness of the society to know how to deal with this. Okay. Because if you are currently taking, for example, the procurement or automated procurement or recruitment processes, several of the top candidates will be disqualified because they are filling in the forms in the traditional form.
Yep. Okay.
They're not even aware that they could be disqualified for the 2 sentences, 3 sentences picked up. So we are taking a look at this very seriously, providing support to the countries, discussing with them what they need, and making sure also that the good practices, and in Europe we have amazing gold mine of the good practices, how from the beginning this was used, that we can also share this with the others, learn from each other, and build some sustainable digital future with the AI. But AI is only one of the technologies.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for
Can
that.
I say something
Of
about
course.
AI? Since I just want to pick out
I love this topic, actually.
on what you
let's stay on
said
it.
about are we still in principle setting phase? And I think it's important that we realize that we set principles back in 2019.
Yeah.
And those are the OECD AI principles that all 38 OECD member countries agreed to. They're the basis for the G20 principles. They're the basis for a whole lot of other work, including the G7's work. They're not trying to create new principles. They're building on the OECD AI principles, which we've had now for almost 5 years. So I think it's important that we not reset new principles that repeat the old principles, because the principles are pretty stable. They say all the things that you said: human-centric, safety and security, innovation and development. I mean, they're stable. They're not going to change. So we need to focus our attention on implementation of those.
Exactly.
And that's what, at least at the OECD, in our context, we've been doing for the last 4.5 years since they were adopted. And so I think it's important that we, for all of us, that we talk about moving beyond setting principles. And it's good that we have as much international alignment around those principles as possible. But I think within the EU and the OECD, which is basically the EU plus 10 more countries, give or take, there's alignment there. We have already principles. We've had them for a long time. They're going to be built on in the context of the G7. If you read the opening of the guiding principles that are out for public consultation from the G7, of which the OECD has been a knowledge partner in that development, that says very clearly we're building on existing principles. So let's not recreate the wheel, but as we move into looking at how they apply in different contexts, whether it's in a sector or whether it's in a particular type of AI, I think that is a more useful way to spend our time.
What is your sense of? Fantastic point. What is your sense? Because principles are, kind of easy to set because they're driven by, essentially the real needs of humanity. But on the translation and the implementation is my question. I've seen that we usually have a tendency to be, kind of like maybe over protective, more on the policing side rather than on the innovation side. Actually, that's a great question for all of you. What is your sense? Are we successfully, implementing the principles and regulation around so that we don't kill the innovation, essentially, and we enable the power of this thing, but do not undermine, the risks that it brings to the table? Audrey, maybe complete your thought. Well, you started this.
Yeah, sorry. Well, actually, I didn't start it. You started it.
But I love it.
I think that's the big question, and there's no clear answer right now. So, since 2019, at least in the OECD context, we've worked with over 79 countries and jurisdictions, including the EU as an institution, to map the principles, of which there are 5 what we call values-based principles and 5 policy recommendations principles. So it's important to understand the difference between sort of safety, security, human rights, transparency, accountability, all of those values-based principles, and policy recommendations, which touch on things like research and investment in innovation and international cooperation. So that's how we get 10 principles at the OECD. So if you go to OECD.ai today, you can see over 1,000 policy initiatives across these almost 80 jurisdictions about AI mapped to those principles. So you can go look at what countries are doing and how they map specifically to those areas. So that gives you a lens through which to look at, how are we taking safety and security seriously, or what does transparency look like? Another piece of implementation for us has been looking at tools, what we call tools for trustworthy AI. And we've broken that down into 3 types of tools. One is normative tools, educational tools, and technical tools. So this is a huge database by which companies all around the world contribute to this catalog so that you can go look at what technical tools software companies are using to eliminate bias in data sets, for example. So that's another thing. And then finally, I mean, I guess I would say the thing we're about to launch on the question of risk, and we've done a lot of baseline definitional work. The EU AI Act is taking a lot of our definitions from the OECD, implementing it in that legislation in order to provide harmonization across how we think about the basics of what AI systems are, what they do. But the next step has been to define what an incident is, what a risk is, what harm is, because if we don't understand what those are, we all talk about it in different ways, and then we have no idea what we're actually looking at.
Okay.
And so we're about to launch an incidents monitor that that allows you to look at incidents related to AI in the world today.
Wow.
That are classified by harm, and you can go to it. It's live. It's just not. It'll be more beautiful in a couple of weeks. It's in final beta testing. So I think it's important that it's good that we do principles, and it's good that we focus on that, and that we bring more people to that table. But it's also important that we not deviate away from actual implementation of what we're doing. And I think, the AI Act is a great example of, the Commission and the European Union has moved forward with legislation in this space, while we're still doing principles and whatnot on, with a broader group of countries. So those can happen in parallel. I mean, I view very much my team's role at the OECD as gathering evidence and putting data behind what's really happening so that we can decide, are we doing good for innovation? Are we managing the risks effectively? Because otherwise we just continue to argue about whose approach is better without any concrete evidence in which to decide how to move forward. So the jury is out on your question, and it will be for quite some time. But I think we're at least we started early enough to put some foundation in place so that
you're watching it.
We're watching.
Okay,
we're watching and we're analyzing.
Invitation for
we're
next year
watching.
to come back and give us some of what real findings. But
Yeah.
Zaneta, you wanted to say something before on this point of like the implementation of the principles.
No, I think we actually agree absolutely, because the times are such that we should resist the temptation of making policies without evidence, without data,
yes, please.
without proper consultations with stakeholders. So I mean, I fully agree on that. That first of all, policy making, and you would see it also in our AI Act, is evidence-based, data-based, but should also be risk-based, yes? So the point is that AI models that present less risk should be less regulated, simple. But of course, we see that exactly this year, generative models of AI came into attention, and we see that there are real risks. It's not only what you said, that a robo is no longer identifying himself as she or he, but sometimes, for example, on Snapchat, it's just presenting itself as a real friend. So maybe we rather want to have, a label that I'm not a human being, I'm, your artificial AI friend. So, I mean, exactly also, this is why I think work on actually accidents and evidence further on should be very useful. And then just one point on implementation. Of course, I think what is different this year is that AI is really under spotlight. And when I'm talking about the work at G7 level, I'm talking about leaders level statement or document or whatever it will be at the end. The point is that this is coming now at the highest decision level possible, yeah? And that's a difference between this year and the years before. It means that it becomes a very, very important societal, political, economical problem. Principle. And I think that as I fully agree, any principle without any application or implementation just doesn't make sense. It can stay on website and we can consult these principles in our spare time, you know. But the point is that you need afterwards, of course, implementation, and I think that one way of implementing principles is through legislation that reflect these principles, or through guidelines or recommendations, etc., etc. So, of course, implementation, and also who will be the organizations monitoring the implementation will be key. Now, another point, just to complicate the debate on AI, I understand that the ambition is that we want to keep, you know, tech global and, you know, standards global and everything. For me, the question of artificial intelligence will be, would we be able to agree on a common set of principles, for example, within G20 format, you know? I'm not so sure. So basically, yes, we should aspire to building as, you know, large coalitions in the name of human-centric and approach, but it's not necessarily sure that we will succeed.
Okay, so the more you open it up, the harder it is to get consensus. Very, very interesting. Jaroslaw, any last thoughts on this?
Well, just my last thoughts are, well, we are passionately watching this, what is happening, in order to get a little bit more clarity, because I think the technologies are not waiting.
Yep.
And with legislation, without legislation, I think that the tech companies will do what markets and investors want them to do, to provide something what will generate the profit. And so at a certain moment, we can wake up too late with status quo. With the technologies which will have the monopolistic position on the market and the AI, and then we'll be trying to regulate this, what we didn't consider earlier. And this has some implications also for our work already on some discussions around the standards for AI for health, AI for agriculture. These are all solutions which are currently bringing a lot of attention of the entrepreneurs which are looking the help and efficiency in the AI solutions. They're coming to the ITU. We are very happy to host them within the framework of the focus groups, developing understanding what should be standardized, what should not be standardized as well. So that's why the participation of the European industry is so important for us to make sure, and that's in line with this, I would call leadership of Europe, because Europe is really taking the steps, solid steps forward in comparison with the different continents. It's catching up. And that's, in fact, the technology developed, standardized, can count on the reliable and predictable environment. And this is something what we need to take a look at in the context of also not controlling, but inspiring the innovation to be much more streamlined and much more going in the direction which we would like to see.
Wonderful.
Over to you.
Okay. Well, I want to stay on this because I think there's something there that I'm observing. You know, I'm on the public, you know, parent-teacher association of my school of my kids, and I can assure you that I'm sure you hear as well. Most of the discussion is parents worried about kids and technology. There's a lot of that going on, and the knee-jerk reaction is to limit the time on the phone. You know, like just kind of like, and it becomes like a withdrawal of technology from the children. My question now is, we had this issue of the digital divide and connectivity and who has access to internet or not had an advantage. It was like a proven thing, right? The question now becomes, if some societies have much better access to AI versus others or sections of society, does that again become like an even bigger digital divide with respect to, you know, the jobs of the future and the and you know, like, so parts of society staying behind, or even countries is that going to be an even bigger, you know, asset to have and have as a society. What do you think, Audrey? Is that something you're watching?
Yeah, we are watching this. I mean, I think a couple of things. Right now, the data shows that most of the AI, I mean, the two big AI players in the world are the US and China.
Yep.
If you look at investment, if you look at research collaboration, and if you look at private sector development. And so there, we should be worried about over-concentration of access to resources. We're also coming into a potential shortage of the kind of semiconductor CPUs needed for training large amounts of data sets, and so that is another concern that we're watching. At the same time, the trends toward AI is, there's sort of a difference between training really, really big models and putting them out for adoption and use in other sectors versus, the adoption and the use in other sectors. So I think it's not entirely clear, and it won't be whether how that is going to shape out. But I mean, we have divides at very different kinds of divides across the world with regard to technology. And any sort of massive amount of financial concentration or resource concentration, in this case, access to GPUs, which are really expensive and really hard to get right now, is a concern. At the same time, we have divides regarding education, regarding skills, regarding access to other basic technologies that we need well before we get anywhere close to AI. Yep. I mean, so we even have, if you look even at the data on cloud computing uptake, right, and sort of we've got long way to go in the private sector in terms of use of other basic technologies before we get to whatever we think of as advanced AI, which is fairly undefined right now. So if you look at what the G7's done, they're talking about advanced AI systems. And I think they mean stuff that is maybe more futuristic than when the chat bot you're using today. And so I think there's a lot of things to unpack there. But we are very concerned about a situation where you look at how the social media landscape unfolded and nobody looks at that and says, yeah, let's do that again. It's a great idea, right? So, I mean, I think, not to be overly provocative, but I think, we ended up with a situation where there's deep distrust and divide in both in the information and in the companies that are behind that. And then you end up at your parent, teacher, whatever. I forget what they call it in English.
PTA, it's called.
Yeah, that thing.
That thing.
Parent-teacher association. Yes. And we don't know what to do except take everything away.
Yeah,
because
that's what's happening.
It's what's
like
happening.
Reaction,
I know. I have young kids too. We just want to take it all away because it's too hard to figure out how to manage it. So we need to not recreate that situation in AI. So there needs to be collaboration across the development and deployment of the technology, but it has to be, I think, to what my colleague here from the commission was saying, it has to be values-based and rights-based. We can't we worry a lot about access to really powerful technology by actors that are likely to misuse it and to use it against otherwise democratic, processes. And so that, I mean, I wish I spent earlier this week with some of the best and brightest, AI scientists in the world who were at the OECD, and you ask them this exact question, and nobody exactly knows how it's going to play out. And so we're trying to piece together a complex puzzle. But yes, it's a concern, and it should be a concern, and we should be ahead of that concern rather than behind that concern.
Okay.
If I could add on...
Please jump in. This is fascinating, actually.
I think that this question fits very well to the European Year of Skills, declared by
I was going there, actually.
Yeah, so we are, of course, as the Europe office, very much in line with what is happening at the EU level, but also in the accession countries and others. And digital skills is some subject which is very close to our heart, because this is the core of the capacity building. The data are terrifying. So at the European level, we have like 50% of the population has the basics digital skills. Maybe we do not take this into account because all of us, we are in the digital area, so for us the use and the use is something normal, yes. But for most of society is a challenge. Yes, elderly people, many employees are struggling with the effective use of the simple applications. So we are not talking about AI. AI is something what is coming now. We are trying to push to take a look at the discussions how to address this issue, because this will impact also the curricula at schools, starting from the from the primary school. My daughter came, she's 9 years old, and she said, "Papa, the teacher told me that I should not use chat GPT. What is this?" Yes, and I was like, wow, it's great. You're 9 years old and you are already discussing this. But of course, she started to chat because I had to show her, and she said, oh, this could make my homework. So the conclusion was very clear. So in case we are not acting now, of course, we'll produce effective users of the technologies with, which will be persons with disabilities once the technology will be away. Yeah. Because they will be disabled from the operations. They will not know where to go, what to do, how to react, and how to answer the question. Mm-hmm. And this is really terrifying. When you are taking a look at the data on the digital skills, still in the West, is fine. Once you are going to the East, the numbers are dropping down. Yeah. You have perfect mobile social media users, but in terms of the real application, you cannot talk about this. We have several interventions in the Balkan region, assessing the skills of the public service and elderly people and the other groups of societies. I think we have a significant challenge in case this will not be prioritized equally to the discussion how to drive the innovation and so on. We will have a really marginalization, much bigger than the digital divide based on the connectivity. I think that several 100 years ago, when connectivity was just the way to communicate and exchange words, we were very lucky. This was one divide. But now we're entering in such a spectrum of the divides that they have to be treated as the one challenge which really not tackled will never give us the hope that meaningfulness of the connectivity will be fulfilled.
Okay, and what are we going to do about it as a European Commission?
Well, I fully share, first of all, the view on skills.
Skills, yes.
And actually, European Commission through its funding for resilience and recovery plans. So those were like plans designed by countries to recover after COVID pandemic. Yes. And in total, we have 130 billion euros for Europe for digital components. So digital transition, digital skills, infrastructure, connectivity, etc., etc. But there I want to emphasize that indeed we paid great attention that every country, well, including Latvia, by the way, are having like a very solid component on digital skills. Okay. And where I fully agree with Jaroslaw, it's not about like some kind of sophisticated IT specialists, or although we also need those, but I mean, it's really about basic skills, yeah, because half of populations are simply not able to follow. So that's maybe on skills. But secondly, I think if we were talking about trends next year and beyond, I would say, because next year is very short, I would also think that there will be a further, let's say, strengthening of technological competition between different regions in the world. And we also see it, for example, with the way the US are using certain tools, such as export controls to control certain technologies going into China that could be used for civil-military fusion. Because all these technologies we are talking about, quantum, AI, etc., these are also technologies that are used for military. Yep. And so I think that with the war in Ukraine ongoing, and also how we see that items that we find on battlefield are not necessarily dual-use items per se. Those can be also kind of a microchip that can go into, I don't know, fridge or TV, but if you put it in a missile, then the missile gains in precision, you know?
Yeah,
So, I
okay.
mean, all these geopolitical turmoils we are living through now will also intensify the conversation on who is leading on tech and where the leading tech should go and not go. So I see it coming. But this is why also European Union is having very important niche programs into kind of like cutting-edge tech, I would say. For example, in the area of supercomputing, we are very successful global leaders in that area. And I wonder if somebody in the room knows who is Jupiter and who is Lumi, by any chance?
Oh, there is.
They know, but I don't know. Who are they?
So these are actually supercomputers. Jupiter is what we call X-scale supercomputers that is going to be installed in Germany. Is about to be installed. And basically that will be also like a supercomputers that would work on software and on artificial intelligence modeling, and it is very important because here Europe should open these supercomputers to as many users as possible, because for example Jupiter will be able to create a digital twin of the planet Earth with many, I don't know how many variables, and actually use the digital twin to simulate climate events and see actually what could happen. So, I mean, there are also very big societal benefits. And Jupiter will also be able to create a digital twin of a human body. That could be quite important if you want to achieve disruption in health sector, for example, cancer treatment. You could work with this digital twin to, for example, simulate various chemotherapies that could be built upon individual needs, individual gene and immune system. So, I mean, there is also many reasons why we need this small kind of niche programs. Okay, it's 2.7 billion for...
So the human digital twin, huh? It's coming.
And Lumi, I just want to mention Lumi in Finland. So that's another supercomputer, Lumi. And why it's important? Because it is one of the most powerful supercomputers on the Earth. And at the same time, it is perfectly climate neutral. So here I'm making also the point that not only we want to be digital, but we can also be sustainable at the same time. It's feasible.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Well, thanks for all of that. We diverted a little bit, I think it was fascinating discussion. Let's take like maybe 1 minute quick on the vision. Let's just jump to something happy and sort of hopeful for the future, and how do you guys see the next few years playing out, and what can we do to make this situation better? Audrey?
So I think just going back to the connectivity piece, this is a really dynamic sector, and it's been a dynamic sector for a really, really long time, and we see lots of investment going into the sector, huge opportunities, governments putting money against recovery plans that are now really accelerating deployment of core connectivity infrastructure, which is going to be the foundation of 5G and then 6G, and the foundation of the ability to use things like immersive environments to do simulation training for pilots and for surgeons and for lots of other areas where practicing in the real world is dangerous, but practicing in a virtual world is less dangerous and probably more cost-effective in the long run. So I see lots of positive, particularly in Europe. Europe has always been really, really strong in the connectivity space, in the competition space. You've got high penetration, you've got good investment, you've got good competition. The Prime Minister this morning, said about Latvia's mobile broadband uptake, which is Latvia's at the top of the OECD stats in terms of mobile broadband. So but you got to lay infrastructure and you got to put fiber in the ground, and a lot of that investment is going into that if we're going to reap the benefits down the line. I mean, the Fedorov said it in his opening remarks too, is that it's the perfect test case for putting more infrastructure in. So I see a lot of opportunity for Europe in particular there as the technology develops, and this is the foundation. I mean, you'll only get so far down the technological development and collaboration path if we don't have really strong high-speed connectivity. And so I think, and since we only have a couple of minutes left, I'll stop there, but say, because all of this is, there's lots and lots of risks, and then we spend a lot of time on those risks because they're critical and they're about our future as the human race on some fundamental level, but there's also a ton of opportunities. And I think if you look at what digital transformation has done to rural populations and other things, you can imagine and extrapolate out how the investment now is gonna reap benefits for us in the future.
Good. Jaroslaw, give us hope.
Yes, we spoke a lot about the digital component. I think this is great. A lot is happening. A lot of expectations also are coming on those who are providing infrastructure. So I think that there is a lot of pressure for all providers and those who are building the solid high-speed internet connectivity and infrastructure in Europe and beyond. This is amazing development, but also we should not forget about also wireless technologies. For us, as all of you know, we are preparing for the World Radio Communication Conference, which will be discussing a lot of different topics, including the future of the 6G, but also the future of the space economy and the space, where we have to take a look how the space connectivity is made as organized as possible in order to provide additional, even bigger value to the ecosystem. I think these are the issues which are not only related to the pure user experience, these are also the infrastructures which are making our Earth safer for the early warning systems, for the safety reasons. So I think we should not forget that interoperability in those systems is so crucial. And therefore we are looking forward to this few weeks in Dubai as also very important milestone for the future. And of course we'll observe increasing demand. We see so much of the pressure of the governments, but also of the citizens on the government to digitize services. So we hope that they will be moving ahead. As the ITU, we are supporting the governments with the building blocks approach under the GovStack initiative, providing some clear standard settings for accelerated digitalization of different services at the country level, which scales up, which even is recognized as one of the important high-impact initiatives by the UN Secretary General. So we are looking forward also to working with many UN partners, but also with engagement of different private sector stakeholders on how to accelerate digitalization process at the country level, and vice versa, providing the clear demand for the solid infrastructure.
Sure. Okay, we were going to take questions from the audience, but I think 0000 means we're fully done. But it was fascinating, at least for me. Thanks a lot. I learned new things, and I hope for the audience. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for your.
Thank you.
And thank you to our moderator, Marios. Marios, thank you very much.